Welcome to the Moved to Meditate podcast. I'm your host, Addie D. Hilster. This is a place for vibrant discussions about mindfulness, movement practices, and ways to find more balance and presence in daily life. Here you'll find resources to help you progress on your path, as well as insightful conversations with mindful movement, yoga, meditation, and Dharma teachers from a range of traditions. On this podcast, we spotlight embodied approaches to mindfulness and the more contemplative aspects of movement practice. Listen in and connect to a community of like-minded practitioners. Hello there. Thanks for joining me today for a new episode of the podcast. In this episode, I have the honor of speaking with Dr. Kate Truitt about the havening technique. If you're not familiar, havening is a therapeutic modality that uses mindful touch and intentional attention to change how your brain responds to stress, to build resilience, and to help heal from traumas. You'll hear about the ways that you can apply the self-havening mindful touch, befriending your amygdala, which is the ancient part of your brain that seeks to keep you safe, but it can easily hijack you with fearful thoughts. And you'll also hear about what happens in your brain when you combine touch, cognitive techniques, and breath regulation in a havening exercise, and how havening can be used not only in the difficult moments, but also as a way to explore positive feelings and states that might feel like kind of a stretch, at least initially. Dr. Truitt also shares her own story of healing from traumatic grief and how havening became such a big part of her work as a neuroscientist and clinical psychologist. We cover practical ways these tools can be used to shift the impact of a stressful event and to decrease the likelihood of being triggered in a similar way in the future. And we discuss how the intentional distractions and brain games in havening help us redirect our attention away from overwhelming thoughts, and how this is compatible with mindfulness practices of non-avoidance and turning towards whatever is coming up. Be sure to check this episode's podcast page on the website at movedtomeditate.yoga/podcast to find the resources from this conversation. Dr. Kate was kind enough to share a few handouts on some of the havening tools, so you can find and download those on the podcast page. Okay, last thing as we prepare to head into this interview. If you're enjoying this podcast, please share it. You can post this episode on social media and let your friends know about this great topic, or you can give us a review on Apple Podcasts, which really helps people find this show in general. The podcast is also now on YouTube, which means you can go listen, like, and subscribe there too. So I hope you'll really enjoy learning about havening from Dr. Kate Truitt in this super informative interview. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the podcast. I am delighted and honored to have with me today Dr. Kate Truitt. Dr. Kate Truitt is a licensed clinical psychologist, applied neuroscientist, and an internationally recognized expert in the neuroscience of trauma, stress, and resilience. She's the co-developer of the havening technique, which is what we're really going to talk about today. It's such an interesting self-regulation modality. I've personally benefited from it, and I wanted to share it with you all today. She's the author of a great book called Healing in Your Hands, Self-Havening Practices to Harness Neuroplasticity, Heal Traumatic Stress, and Build Resilience. I have a copy of it right here. It's an excellent resource. And before we start, Dr. Kate, I also just wanted to give a little shout out to your colleague, Shannon Burns, who I know through the yoga studio that I had when I lived near you guys in LA. And I'm in Washington State now, I'm further away, but I really appreciate Shannon for introducing me to havening and to your work. And without her, this interview wouldn't be happening today. So I appreciate Shannon, and also welcome and thank you, Dr. Kate, for taking the time to speak with me about this today.
Yeah, well, it's a joy and an honor to be here, Addie, and just to double down on that shout out to Shannon. She's a joy and an amazing human.
Yes, absolutely. So I think a good place to start is just with what is havening, because I think that a lot of people aren't familiar yet with this modality, and it's so powerful. I think a lot more people could be benefiting from it. So could you just tell us a little bit about what it is?
Yeah, so havening is the transitive verb for the word haven, which is a safe place. And what it is a modality that harnesses a innate ability that our mind body system has to create healing at a neurobiological level. And I know we'll be talking more in depth about the mechanisms of how all of it works. But the thing that the founders of Havening, Doctors Ron and Steve Rudin, who are two doctors back in New York City, they're twin brothers. Both went to college at the age of 16, and just kind of brilliant, amazing, heartfelt humans. They did a deep dive experience into what if our mind body system had at a brain level the ability to heal the same way that our skin or even can heal from a paper cut, or an arm can even will heal itself if it's broken.
Hmm.
And they discovered that if we utilize specific types of mindful touch called the havening touch plus very specific cognitive protocols and bring them together, we can create long-term change. And so havening has the self-havening healing in your hands application, which is why that's the name of the book, which is all about personal empowerment and doing one's own healing work. And then there's an entire suite of clinical tools that we teach mental health professionals, allied mental health, physicians, so on and so forth, coaches to bring into their actual treatment space. And so it's one of the greatest gifts of it is, unlike so many mental health modalities, when we're doing the havening work, we're teaching our patients to take it home
Hmm.
and to really bring the tools into their day-to-day lives to create healing. And I think more importantly, create the present and build the future by partnering with their brain.
I love that, partnering with their brain. And it is really empowering to have more understanding of the
Mhm.
role that the brain and the body are playing and working together in our experience of stress or recovering from stress or trauma. And I can say, from my own experience with this, that when I was able to attend your workshop a couple of years ago, and I think it was the spring of 2021 for sure, because I know that I was coming out of closing my studio in LA where I met Shannon because of the pandemic. And it was about a year into all of that change, and things were, feeling very uncertain. And I was feeling a certain kind of way, because of that experience. And in that workshop, I felt a really distinct shift in my nervous system, like from doing the havening and watching you and others on the screen also doing it. And that was really impactful for me. It was really the beginning of starting to feel kind of differently and come out of that phase of, change. And so I realized, like, this is quite a powerful set of tools.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and as somebody, I know you do teach trauma informed yoga.
Hmm.
And so having that background in the somatic experience of stress and trauma, and I think this is one of the big messages that I've even navigated on my own personal healing journey, is we can know a lot about what's happening in our mind body system. We can have a whole lot of tools and know how to technically do the things that should be helping us. And so often we are paralyzed because of our own amygdala, our
Hmm.
brain stress, our survival system taking over and hijacking us. And so havening creates a unique window of opportunity in some of the self healing tools, the simplicity of it, the ease of application to get our brain kind of out of its own way and
Yeah.
empower us to regain internal connection with all of our other healing tools. And so it's very integrative into the work that we do. It's not replacing anything, it's an additional tool in the toolkit that can sometimes open that door so we can get back to where we need to be.
Yeah, because when the amygdala is in charge, right? When that fearful part of the brain is in charge, we don't have access to our like higher cognitive functions and all the logic and all of the things that we've matured into as we've grown into being adults, right? And
Mhm.
so we need help to re-access that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and a good data point that I love to share with people, so I'm going to share it right now, if I may,
Please.
is so the amygdala, for our listeners who may not be familiar with that term, we lovingly call her Amy the amygdala. And she is a very, very primal part of our brain. In fact, she's over 300 million years old. So she
Wow.
evolved along with the first vertebrates on this fair planet of ours. And one of her primary directives is to keep us alive, to help us keep breathing every step of the way. And she's very good at her job because evolution keeps what works and kind of slowly gets rid of what doesn't. So she's been around for 300 million years. She works really, really well. She's good at her job. Our prefrontal cortex, in terms of evolution, showed up around 70 to 100,000 years ago. So that's a pretty big gap, 300 million, 70,000. And our thinking brain doesn't formally develop for humans until around our 30s.
Mm,
And our amygdala comes on board while we're still in the womb, in utero. So the amygdala is way more powerful than our thoughts and will heavily influence our thoughts in times of stress or trauma. And also, when we again partner with our brain and work with our neurobiology, we can train our amygdala to have a thrive state, which is the resilience and the personal empowerment. So rather than being fearful, we can be courageous. And we can
mm.
actually teach that at a primal level because our brain would much rather feel courage than fear. But fear's the go to because that's more important sometimes.
It's protective.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that it's like we can make friends with Amy
Uh-huh.
and learn how to utilize her superpowers rather than fall into the habitual natural fear patterns that
Mhm.
she can kick up for us.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
And havening it, what the doctors Rudin discovered, and then they invited me along the journey with them about 10 years ago to really deepen the self-havening part of this, is that's the opportunity to partner with the brain. It's the havening touch and the protocols that they identified the foundation for.
Mm.
So havening is the kind of the warm fuzzy blanket for the amygdala that says, here's your chicken soup and a chocolate chip cookie and a warm fuzzy blanket. We're good now.
We're okay.
We're okay. Exactly, Hattie, exactly.
And I'm assuming that many of our listeners have probably not experienced self havening before, unless they've stumbled upon your wonderful YouTube channel and they may be a
Thank
big
you for the
fan
plug. I
already.
appreciate that.
There's a lot of great resources there. And I would recommend that for people who need a visual on this, since this podcast is audio. But could you describe how to do the self havening touch? And maybe we can all be doing a little bit along for a minute as we talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So the self-havening touch, as I mentioned, is a mindful touch, and it focuses on four primary areas that science has shown to have the greatest electrochemical benefit that we're looking for the outcomes we're seeking. So the best ability to partner with our amygdala, so to speak. And the first touch we call palm havening, which if remember at the beginning of the pandemic where everybody was washing their hands and singing songs.
Oh, yes.
Yes, those of us who are in the havening community were thrilled because that's actually one of our protocols called CPR for the amygdala. And I'll share a little bit more about that in a moment. But it's literally as though you're washing your hands under warm water, a gentle palm against palm, soothing connection. And what that gentle touch does is we have little fibers in our skin that respond to gentle, soothing touch. Then the second touch is the havening hug. I like to reference it as a moving hug. So if you've ever held your arms or crossed your arms across your chest, kind of held yourself in a moment of stress, well, that's a natural way that you're engaging those fibers. And here we're going to amp up the opportunity, cross arms across chest, fingertips on shoulders, and gently move your hands down to your elbows. And then repeat that motion, moving hug, to once again continue to engage those little receptors in our skin. And then the final two engage the face. And the nice thing, Addie, about the havening touch is any of these touches can be used in isolation or they can be combined. And so we always say, find your best space.
Mm.
You don't have to do all of them if one's uncomfortable or doesn't, or if people have pain. I know you do a lot of work in your studio with people who have pain. You know, it might be hard to do the havening hug, but palm havening's easier.
Mm-hmm.
And on the YouTube channel, we have an entire video dedicated to modifications. But the final two are moving your hands right across your brow. If anybody listening here has ever had a tension headache, then you might be familiar with this motion. So it's circling your eyebrows very gently. And then the fourth and final touch is circling right underneath your eyes, following your cheekbones. And so if you've ever wiped away a tear, this is a part of what that's doing. It's wiping away the tear actually helps the brain move into a state of greater calm. So these little receptors are all over our body. And the best way to know if you have them is if you've ever had a moment in your life where you've run into a piece of furniture and dinged your shin or a hip or something and immediately reached down and gently applied a soothing touch. That's your brain and your body going, I need to engage those receptors. It's a
Mm.
very natural motion that we do. And that motion actually creates a new electrochemical environment in our brain and releases serotonin and oxytocin, GABA. If anybody hears on gabapentin, then that's actually an internal chemical that we have. And they're all very calming and soothing. So we can downregulate our brain very quickly just by washing our hands or giving ourselves a moving hug.
I love all of them, and my favorite really is the eye one, but I'm a glasses wearer, so I do the hand one a lot. Unless I'm in a place where I can actually take my glasses
Yeah.
off and do a little bit of that. And I often will do a few minutes of havening before I sit in meditation too,
Mm-hmm.
because it's just, it's a good way to set yourself up to actually enjoy and benefit from a practice like that.
Yeah. And what a wonderful grounding opportunity, because especially I know meditation for me, and you would never know this from my YouTube channel, I do a guided exercise every week that we put out there. My brain is a squirrel brain.
A
Like,
human brain, right?
yes, yeah, and I mean, and I have ADHD, and so my brain is always jumping, jumping, jumping.
Mm.
And Addie, I've never even thought about doing a little bit of havening and then practicing my mindful practice. I just do the havening touch throughout. But what a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful intervention for our individuals who do regular meditation to just take that opportunity and help the brain down regulate. I'm going to try that. I might be a better meditator now. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. I mean, I'm all about ways of making meditation a little bit easier, and a lot of times what hinders us is just our nervous system isn't quite ready for stillness, and we need to
Hmm.
do a few more things to help prepare ourselves
Yeah,
to
beautifully
actually,
stated.
yeah, to follow the instructions, which are not easy to follow.
Oh, that is so beautifully said. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah. I'm curious about this kind of self-touch. Some of us may feel the effects right away, and
Mhm.
some of us may be like, I don't know, is this working? Is it something that works better as you continue to practice it,
Mhm.
or how does that go?
Yeah. So usually the effect can start to be noticed about if some people's systems are a little slower to engage about 30 to 45 seconds. And then the more we do it, it's like muscle memory. And it's what I call neural memory. The mind body system starts to link into it and be able to anticipate it. And so, over the course of time, the more we practice it, one of the really cool things is that we're working a lot with our working memory system, which is one of the key interventions of using distractions plus the havening touch to downregulate the system. Let's do a little brain exercise real quick, havening touch or not. If you've ever, well, you do yoga, and I'm imagining a lot of your listeners are yogis.
Hmm.
So I'd just like to invite you to imagine that you're transitioning through three of your favorite yoga poses and just you move into one, do a breath, move into the next, do a breath, and then move into the next. And let me know when you're done.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
ready.
And did it feel like you're doing it?
Yeah, I kind of feel like a similar internal state that
Yeah.
would be familiar from doing that kind of a movement.
Yeah, yeah. So I played basketball my whole life. I'm 5'10", and so that was just kind of the mandate. Um,
I love
and so,
basketball.
yeah, okay, then we're on the same page. So, like, if somebody says, "Imagine you're holding a basketball and then bouncing it and doing a layup," I can get that entire muscle flow sitting right here, and that's our working
Mm-hmm.
memory system.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the easiest brain tools that we can use is imagination in that sensory way to give our brain a different job, and to the point of you feeling, oh, that internal space from doing the yoga, you're there. So we can use that, or we can also imagine we're playing the havening touch the more often we use it. So in moments that are difficult, where you may not want people to know that you're having an activation response,
Mm.
and imagining the application of the havening touch will downregulate the system.
Wow. So it can become so powerful that you can have a stealth havening
Yes.
practice.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
It's a
Now
superpower.
that's really cool. I never thought of that. Because there could be environments you're in that are highly stressful, and those tend to be the ones where you wouldn't want to be seen, like doing some kind of movement that most people in the room
Yeah.
are not familiar with, right?
I mean, anything from, a family event all the way up to giving a large presentation in front of a group of people.
Hmm.
So, and a lot of our patients do that, and I certainly do myself.
Hmm.
And it's just, our brain is so powerful, and the new opportunities in neuroscience are create. And this is why I'm an applied neuroscientist: is how do we take neuroscience and make it real world?
Yeah.
And having the clinical psychology doctorate helps. How do we make ourselves better every single moment? And havening really helps a lot and empowers it.
Would you say that it can be helpful to have someone else doing the havening
Mhm.
alongside you where you can see them doing it? Like, is there something that goes on with our mirror neurons or just our empathy that makes that connection a little bit more potent?
Yes, and you said the magical words, mirror neurons. Absolutely. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't have a YouTube channel. I'd maybe put up a couple pieces of content, but I felt really weird to me. And when the pandemic started, we had so many patients reaching out, and just kind of people I'd trained around the world saying, "We need help. Kate, can you please give us some resources?" And so I did one of the first guided meditations on there, and actually got picked up by Netflix and sent out to all of their employees,
Whoa.
which was crazy. And I'm like, oh, that wasn't a very good one. Um,
It was clearly good enough.
Good
It was
enough.
quite useful.
But people were hungry and desperate. And the point of doing the YouTube channel now is, so many people don't have access to resources. And that's one of my biggest missions in life is, how do we help people have support and tools and knowledge? And so the weekly experientials have a lot of guided exercises where I'm havening, or one of my teammates is running an exercise, and just simply watching the video, even if you're not applying the havening touch, will start to downregulate the system. And it's especially for people who live with chronic pain or chronic illness, or feeling paralyzed in their stress or their trauma or their depression. Being able to watch the video and hear it in of itself will start to create that space. Now, side hack for parents with highly, highly energized children: the parent starts applying the havening touch and humming some songs. Distractions are a big part of downregulating the mind body system, plus with the havening touch. The child will inevitably start watching the parent, and then their own sweet little brains and bodies will start to be downregulated. And we have teachers who are now bringing this into their classrooms. We're partnered with a number of amazing educational programs around the world. And it's just the teacher or the parent applying that soothing, havening touch, maybe getting a little polyvagal rocking cerebellum, mindfulness grounding, and the kids just start doing it too. And we have a calmer brain and body for the developing system of the little one.
That's brilliant.
Oh, I love it. It's great.
That's so brilliant. It's, what it's making me think of, and this is really silly, but flash mobs where people like,
I've done them.
you
Yes.
done a flash, you just like a bunch of people suddenly dancing in public. What if
Yes.
there were like havening flash mobs and we could calm down the public? Because like,
Oh, Addie, here we go. Writing that down.
because these days, when I go out in public, and it's so different after all that time in, lockdown and
Yeah.
going out, people are so stressed, and you can just tell by the way they drive or the way they run over you with their grocery cart at the store. And you pick up on that and get irritated or agitated as well. I certainly notice it myself, and I have a lot of tools for self-regulation. But that's why I'm having this silly vision of just, how can we give some people an assist with their nervous system to just, create a little bit more calm and sanity in the world.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Because and I think the other piece I want to highlight in the compassionate way you just shared that is we are all stressed and our amygdalas are running the show. And so we're just kind of missing the greater part of humanity. And it's not because people are selfish or, focused and ego driven. It's just we've all been through something and our system is still trying to figure out how to once again re-enter the world.
Hmm.
And when we're in survival mode for so long, whether it be growing up in a house of chaos or stress or going through what we've all been through collectively with the pandemic, it rewires the brain. And the havening work gives us an additional opportunity for creating that space for the amygdala to get out of its own way, to feel safe, have the warm, fuzzy blanket and the chicken soup, and go, oh, yeah, we're better together.
Yeah. And we're in such a hurry to get back to quote normal.
What is that?
What is that? And I know it, a lot of us in that time when things really shut down, we're having visions of like, maybe we could come out of this differently, maybe we could create a new vision for how things are. And it seems like there's a strong momentum for, let's try to recreate the normal that we had, but I question how well that's working.
Exactly. Well,
Yeah.
and we won't go back to what we had because it happened. We are all different.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, we call challenges on my team opportunities. Every challenge has an opportunity hidden within it. And so I think we're in that window of time now of where do we find the opportunities and within the learnings of the pandemic and all of the, and not just the pandemic, all of the sociocultural movements that have unfolded and are still unfolding around us, so that as a species, as humans, we find the next through line, the next connection with one another. We got to help our brains know that, hey, we're safe. It's okay.
Hmm.
Even if it doesn't feel safe, we can come back to self, come home.
That's so beautiful. In your book, you shared a little bit about your own history and how it led you to this path of neuroscience and particularly trauma recovery and havening. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, of course. I actually have another book coming out in a couple months that
Oh,
is a
exciting.
kind of my version of trying to emulate Brene Brown and Bessel van der Kolk's Body Keeps the Score, a combo platter of that. And it's about my story. And so I was widowed, and I say widowed. Um, I we had the marriage certificate in our hands, but he died. My partner of 10 years died a week before our wedding, and I was the one who found him and tried to save his life and was unable to. And that opened up what I think is kind of a Pandora's box of childhood trauma, attachment trauma, and just complex nuances surrounding what ultimately led to his death, which was he accidentally overdosed. He had a very severe illness. We didn't know what it was. It's called a ghost illness.
Mm,
And he was medically mismanaged.
mm,
And so he was supposed to go into treatment the day after our wedding. And we were a week too late. So I lived for 5 years as a trauma expert historically for already around 10 years, studying the neuroscience of fear and stress, largely because at 20 years old, I was like, why is my brain so broke? I need to get a
Mm-hmm.
handle on this. Like, why do I have such severe social anxiety and depression? And so I started working in rat labs, trying to understand it. And, and I thought I had a really solid handle on it. And then when he passed on, my brain just opened up this whole new world of trauma, and I had traumatic grief. And for 5 years, just kind of tried all of the modalities and all the things. And I also had an incident where I was in a car accident. From that, my brain was vulnerable to a brain virus called encephalitis. And so for 18 months, I was battling for my life. It was kind of a perfect storm of my early 30s of the
Mm.
universe going, let's see if you've really got it in you to make it through, Kate. Let's just really push the button and see what happens.
Wow.
And, I got through a lot of it, but my brain was still paralyzed. And on a wing and a prayer, a dear friend and colleague of mine, Bill Souls, mentioned this thing called havening to me. And I thought it was so weird. It's like you're going to rub your arms and rub your palms together and sing some songs or play some brain games, and your trauma is going to go away and your brain's going to get better. And then he's like, yeah, and also there's other protocols where you can actually de-link the deeper frameworks of the brain, what are called cognitive schemas. And I was like, oh, hogwash.
Yeah, right.
Right. It just, too good to be true. No way. I'm not drinking your Kool-Aid, buddy. Um, but I was very casually dating a guy who's now my husband. We going on almost 10 years together, which is amazing. And had been to have free miles, and he said, I know you want to go to this thing in New York. And I was like, I don't really want to go. And he's like, well, I've got free miles, so you got a free plane ticket, and I can get you a hotel room. Why don't you go to New York with me? And literally we went on 4 dates when we first met, and then I moved almost an hour and a half away. So it's like,
Oh.
we're not really in this dating thing because my brain was so goofed up. And so I went to the conference, and that first breakout group, one of the founders, Dr. Steve Rudin, sat down and said, hey, does anybody have something they'd like to try this protocol with? And I was definitely the jerk who put her hand up and said, yeah, I've got like a plus 20 trauma. Let's see how it
You're
works.
like, let's really put this to the test.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I've done hundreds, tens of thousands of dollars of therapy and EMDR and all the things, and nothing worked. And 15 minutes later, I opened my eyes and the memory is completely transformed.
Wow.
And, it was astounding and completely and utterly shocking to me. And I've been living with nightmares and panic attacks and insomnia, and I mean, just the constellation of all the PTSD symptoms for 5 years. And then it was just, there's my brain. Hi, brain. I missed you. Good to see you again.
Wow.
And so I remember I opened my eyes and I looked at him like, can we grab a bite to eat? I need to talk to you about this. And I was like, how do I help?
Mm.
Because the world needs this. And at that point, that was the second training ever. This was 2014. And nobody west of Detroit had heard of havening. And so I brought it back to LA. Nobody knew what I was talking about. Everybody had the same response I did. That's wacky and weird. And now, we're partnered with some of the really incredible global organizations. We've done trainings with the Department of Defense. We're in a number of different schools. Like, it's just all these things unfolding. It's incredible.
That is quite amazing. That, yeah, I mean, thank goodness you took a leap and
Or thank goodness my now partner was like, by the way, I already got your ticket. He did.
you got the nudge just when you needed it, and you put your hand up to actually give it a chance, and
Yeah.
it's quite amazing what has started to unfold from that.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
the partnership with the brain is real, and I know that from my own experience and the thousands of individuals I've been blessed to walk alongside. We can really fundamentally change our brain. Our brain is capable of it. We just haven't known how to really deeply partner. and it does make the other work more powerful. It makes, as we talk about, Shannon's trained in trauma-informed yoga, right? Like, and she
Hmm.
brings this into the work. It's incredible what's possible.
You alluded to CPR for the amygdala earlier, and this is one of the tools that I can remember to use a lot, and that's really helpful. And we talked about Amy, the amygdala, and this is one of the ways to have a little conversation with her. So, could you walk us through what that is, CPR for the amygdala, how we might use that?
Yeah, absolutely. So CPR stands for creating personal resilience. So the CPR for the amygdala protocol is fundamentally about creating personal resilience for our amygdala. So you can hear the partnership right there. How do
Hmm.
we help her out? And the idea, and the best framework to think about it is, most people are familiar with the idea of breath work to downregulate the body. And then
Hmm.
it has a further downstream effect of downregulating the brain. CPR for the amygdala downregulates the brain automatically. And the acronym that we use to teach it is SNAP. So it's like we're snapping the amygdala out of a moment of distress so we can put that warm fuzzy blanket around her. SNAP stands for we're sensing something's wrong. So part of our nervous system is setting up a flag where we're ruminating on a difficult thought. Our chest is feeling really tight. Our stomach's clenched. Our shoulders are at our ears. That's always a good sign. We're picking at our nails, whatever it might be, with something. Our brain and our body are going, something's off.
It's like, I'm not comfortable here.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't even need to necessarily know why. It's just there's been a data point, and our brain's great at giving us data, and humans are great at ignoring data. And so the next step is to notice rather than ignore it. We're leaning in. So, as Dr. Daniel Siegel, who's a brilliant scientist, highlights, we have to feel it to heal it. So, we're sensing it, something's off, noticing it, hey, there you are. And then we have a tool called the emotions thermometer, which, if you can share tools on your account or on your website, Addie, I'm happy to share
Hmm.
these two handouts so your listeners can have them.
That would be great. We can put them in the resources section on the
Awesome.
page. Yeah.
Awesome. And I just gave her a thumbs up, not that any of you could see that.
They felt it.
Yeah. um, so we notice on the emotions thermometer, which is a 0 to 10, where are we right now? And which the noticing brings the cognitive brain online automatically. Because if Amy's really excited or freaked out about something, our thinking brain can be turned off. And then we start to apply that gentle, soothing, havening touch, the palm, havening hug, face. And then P stands for preoccupy. So just like we did the yoga exercise, basketball, it could be simply humming songs, which is a double bonus of, if anybody's familiar with polyvagal theory, getting the vagus nerve to start to downregulate. We can do breath work with breath counts. All of those preoccupy that working memory system. And the working memory is our internal Google search for how our brain makes sense of the world.
Mm.
And when Amy's running our Google search, it's all of our search terms, especially if she's freaked out about something, are going to be towards negative things. All of the results are going to be negative, difficult, stress based. And so we're intentionally clearing out the Google search by going yoga and breath. And that's the new neurobiological Google search with the application of the havening touch. And then the Google search is count by fives to 100. And then the Google search may be sing the alphabet song or hum it. And then the Google search may be A to Z, one of my favorites, cheesy 80s and 90s bands, all the while applying the havening touch. And the working memory is a very rapid processor of data. So it's a quick Google search. Just like when we put something in, we scroll down the page, we don't really pay attention to the Google search anymore. And through doing that, we're creating a permissiveness for the electrochemical part of the havening touch to start to wrap that warm, fuzzy blanket around the amygdala and calm her down so that she can't keep Google searching the hard things, which keeps her activated. So we're going, no, no more hard stuff, Amy. We're cool. And then once we're calm, we can use our Google search with intention. And this is my favorite part of havening with that creating possibilities protocol, where we go, wait, Amy also wants to feel good things. So what do we want to feel more of? In this moment of activation, what would I rather have if this happens again? Because life keeps happening. And then asking ourselves, what if I was that while applying the havening touch? So what if I
Mm.
was calm? Or what if I was strong? What if I was confident? And even better, if we can remember a time we felt that way, or if we can focus on an object or a person who represents something similar to that. So we've had a lot of people like use Tom Hanks as a representative of calm confidence, or Mrs. Maisel,
Oh
right?
yeah.
She's amazing.
Who is
Like,
your icon of that quality?
oh, beautiful way to
Right.
say it. Oh, I
Right.
love that. Absolutely. And just kind of holding that and being like, what if? And noticing and borrowing that energy.
Mm-hmm.
And then the what ifs start to give the amygdala a new Google search. What if? What if? What if? What if? Building that new neural pathway.
It's such it's such a thorough protocol, and I think I just kind of want to like tease it out a little bit because it's, first the noticing of the discomfort and, oh, something's going on, and turning towards that, which is very much, what we teach in mindfulness, turning towards, right? And then using this, multifaceted set of tools, the touch, which, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that does in the brain, but also the occupying your mind, shifting your attention away from what was causing the distress and onto something else, so that you have a chance to get some space around it,
Yeah.
essentially. And my favorite one, you mentioned a few of those distractions or, mind games. My favorite one is the naming 5 things for each letter of the alphabet that are foods. So
Mm.
I will start, doing the palm havening and go asparagus, arugula, artichokes, applesauce, allspice, bagels, baba ganoush, and on and on. And it's really helpful to have all those facets
Mhm.
acting at once.
Well, and I'm so glad you brought that part in. So the amygdala speaks the language of our senses. So it's not English, French, Mandarin, or ASL or anything else. She really focuses on what we're seeing, smelling, hearing, tasting, touching. And so when we find a personal distraction that helps our system link into that. So you said baba ganoush. I love baba ganoush. And I was immediately, oh, I forgot about baba ganoush.
Yeah, I know. These are like, some of them are like a little spark of, ooh, tasty. I like, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah, and so that's starting to get the sensory system, which deepens that neurobiological Google search. And then
Mm,
it's also an honoring of who we are and what we enjoy and like.
mm.
So, like, I rescued a racehorse off the track several years ago, and
Wow.
grooming him is one of my favorite distractions. I grew up in Kansas. I'm from the Midwest, and so being in a barn is kind of my own haven.
Mm,
So I can smell the hay. I can smell that horsey smell, which for some people is not great, but for me it's delightful. I can feel the curry comb in my hand, and it's an amazing sensory journey that brings me back to grounded calm. And then it's the application of the havening touch that also shifts and actually heals whatever it was that was activated in the moment. And I think that's one of the most powerful things about the CPR for the amygdala protocol. And then there's a deeper protocol we do in treatment called event havening. But the idea that we can empower ourselves or teach others, and I encourage all of your listeners, go get the handout off Addie's website and bring this into your lives, use it, because and teach it to people, or go on the YouTube channel and learn it. Because we're not just down regulating the system like we did with breath work. It's a faster version of mindfulness, in that whatever got triggered in that moment to cause the amygdala to kind of throw a yellow or red flag on the play, that's a receptor in our brain that's been taught that whatever's happening is stressful or even traumatic. And the distractions plus the havening touch actually can heal that, make it less likely or even unlikely that that same experience will be triggered again by that same sensory element. And I don't know of anything more better than that. Like that, how cool.
That's huge because, something can happen to you in your life. Like it happens to all of us. And then you can just be relaxing, sitting on the couch watching a TV show, and someone says something and it sparks that thing, or they have a similar, storyline or something that comes up. And all of a sudden you're just like, whoa, where am I? This thing is, you're triggered, right? And that would be a great example of when to pull in this tool,
Yes.
right? To use that as not, that moment of suffering as an opportunity to flip the script and heal that, so that you're less sensitive in the future to the similar kind of, tripwire like that.
Mhm. Yeah. And how empowering is that to know? I love what you just said, turning that moment of suffering into an opportunity. So if we all get caught up in different interactions with humans, I am the queen of having ongoing debates in my head that are usually, not the best feeling if something hasn't gone the right way or somebody quirked their eyebrow in a specific way. I do it less so now, but as humans, we're hardwired to pay attention to facial expressions and have a very strong response to them. In fact, that's one of the parts of our brain that develops earliest as soon as we're born is our ability to read facial expressions.
Hmm.
And how often does somebody give us a look or we experience somebody as giving us a look and then our brain's off and running about whatever that look might have meant, especially if that person means something or has some sort of authority. And here we can just go, oh, hi, brain, I see you. Okay, you're a little freaked out or worried, or to your point, watching a TV show and our brain gets triggered by something. And instead going, I've got a tool to help my brain not worry about that anymore so I can be back here in this moment and know that I'll be less triggered by that in the future. That's pretty cool.
It literally expands your world,
Mhm.
because if you feel like you've got to construct your life in such a way that you have to avoid this, and this trigger,
Uh-huh.
your world gets a lot smaller.
Yeah. Well, and I did one of the stories I share in the new book is I was at a show. The Gorbals here in Los Angeles are a wonderful comedy improv group, and a lot of the people who are on Saturday Night Live started there. And so I went to a Gorbals show. It was amazing. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And there was a scene where that opened up with a body, and it was a hilarious scene according to everybody else, and the person, and had a sheet on it. Now the person was just kind of supposed to be sleeping or whatever it was on the stage, but when the stage went up, all I saw was a white sheet, and I had a full-blown panic attack. And from there on, I never went to any sort of public event. I just did not feel safe unless it
Mm,
was like, okay, here's a very specific artist. I know all of their songs, and my seat is on the very end aisle. So if I need to leave, I can. Highly managed, structured life
yeah.
because I didn't trust that my brain wouldn't get triggered by something. And when we're living with PTSD, a trigger can be a full blown panic attack, which is what happened to me in the middle of Hollywood.
Hmm.
And when those moments happen, our brain remembers. And had I had this tool, which I didn't have at the time, I could have just stepped out and been like, okay, Amy, you're freaked out. High five. You think you're keeping me safe. Now let's chill. We're cool.
Let's put this back into proper context, that
Yeah.
we're it's okay, we're here, we're watching a comedy show,
Yeah.
this is not an emergency. But I can understand, Amy, why
Uh huh.
you felt that way at first.
Yep. Yeah. And those,
Yeah.
those moments are so human and they don't require having PTSD. We all, our amygdala remembers things. And again, she wants to keep us safe. That's her primary job. And so she can spin up something from 40 years ago and say, I'm freaking out about that blue pillow. And we're sitting here in 2023 going, why that blue pillow? And why a pillow? That's weird.
Yeah.
Or whatever it might be, or a song, or a smell, or any of the senses. It doesn't matter. Our brain will just go, that one time might have hurt me. And so I remember it.
I think this element of using a distraction is really interesting, because for those of us who are like trained mindfulness teachers, we're a little allergic to the word distraction. And so I just kind of want to like clarify a little bit like the way that you're using it, because I would call it a mindful distraction or a skillful
Mhm.
distraction,
Right.
or I sometimes have heard things like that referred to as like a channel changer,
Ah,
because, in the spirit of mindfulness, we're turning towards this experience enough to know that it's overwhelming us and we're not
mhm.
in the present moment with it anymore. And so we're using this skillful tool to um, shift away from that. Do you
Mhm.
want to speak to that a little bit more? If
Yeah.
someone is allergic to the word distraction.
Well, and that's where, with the acronym SNAP, sense, notice, apply, preoccupy. So the preoccupy would be the distraction, but we've already sensed into it. We want to empower our mind body system to have the relationship with the data, to notice that it's there, and
Hmm.
then preoccupying, changing the channel. And we do incorporate a lot of mindfulness experiences. So when we're doing the 5 4 3 2 1 sensory exercise, that's a channel change, or that's a different Google search. We're
Hmm.
saying working memory, go over here now, as opposed to being paralyzed in whatever it is you is. It's intentional attention to something else. And it doesn't mean that we're avoiding. And I hear this a lot. They're like, well, you're
Hmm.
not supposed to avoid. I'm like, well, that's why we're sensing it, we're noticing it. And then we're applying that healing touch. And then we're preoccupying, we're going in a different direction, so that we can then revisit whatever it was that was happening and find the opportunity within it. Or if we're really busy, just go, whew, and move on. And then we have in the Healing in Your Hands book, and also on the YouTube channel, we have an entire resilient brain care program that does highlight, at the end of the day, come back and revisit those moments,
Hmm.
because the revisiting also is an opportunity for strengthening,
Hmm.
or an opportunity to say, okay, in that moment, that didn't feel great, or I wasn't my best self. Because I don't know about you, Addie, but I have moments where I'm not always my best self.
Oh, never.
Yeah, right. It happens. And going, what would I like to do next time if that energy shows up? How do I give that energy a new job?
Hmm.
And starting to do that, creating possibilities protocol to build that new opportunity. And this is the partnership with the brain, sculpting the brain so that we're not fearful of overwhelm or anxiety or panic, which a lot of these models came out of my own journey of being paralyzed, even as a trauma person who knew all the neuroscience data and still being completely out of control
Hmm.
because my amygdala was in charge. It didn't matter what I knew. And saying, okay, how do I partner with my brain? And this was before havening. If I'm going to live with a brain that's freaked out about 80% of the world a lot of the time, what's the new way forward?
That's really helpful. And because it's different than the ordinary way we might use the word distraction.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, I'm feeling a little agitated or bored or, you know, off. And so I'm going to pick up my phone and scroll for 30
Yeah.
minutes, right? Instead of actually acknowledging
Mhm.
what's going on and using a skillful tool. That's the way we normally talk about distraction, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's about intentional attention,
Exactly.
and which is very different from, the binging of a TV show, or, like, as you know, doom scrolling, or going to the refrigerator or picking up the bottle of wine. All of those things are easy buttons, and they don't help the system actually move into a new soothing healing direction. So the intentional attention part is very, very important with the preoccupy, or the distractions, which is, it's
Mm.
mindful. It's mindful distraction.
Intentional attention is one of the ways that I often describe what mindfulness is when people ask, for a definition. So I
Oh, I love
think
it.
it's very much in keeping with that.
Yeah.
And the touch aspect, I kind of wanted to come back to that because does this do? I'm curious to know, and I think I've seen some of your work maybe states that the touch itself stimulates some particular reaction or
Mhm.
wave pattern in the brain that's beneficial.
Yeah. So the little fibers that we're engaging, they're called C-tactile fibers. And they go up to our somatosensory cortices, our insula, and then a couple other brain parts, and they all kind of wrap around the system to change the electrochemical waves in our brain. So our brain is a symphony of different types of brain waves. We have all sorts of different brain waves going on at any given time. Hopefully your listeners, and hopefully you are as well, Addie, are in a state of beta, of curiosity and interest. If I'm doing my job right, that's happening. There were, for all of us, probably times during this call where people might have dropped into a little bit of a alpha wave, a little kind of chill zone state, or then maybe popped up like, hey, that's interesting. Or when we start laughing and connecting on something, we might even bump up to a fast brainwave state called gamma. In a moment of extreme stress or a traumatic encoding specifically, our brain has to go into hyper gamma. Hyper gamma is 100 hertz. It's very, very, very fast. And if we think about how it feels when we're in a state of extreme stress or extreme excitement, that's a hyper gamma wave state. So the best way to describe that is to just, I'll ask everybody to just do an internal check on if you love roller coasters or hate roller coasters. Most people tend to be, Addie's going thumbs down.
I'm like, no, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So for those who love them and those who hate them, imagine that for whatever reason, you're just about to get onto Goliath or like some major roller coaster, and you're going to strap into a metal box and plummet up the earth at a very fast rate of speed. Now, as humans, that's a poor plan for survival. We should not do that, and yet these things exist. So that's why it's exciting or terrifying, because our brain knows we shouldn't do it. And so that brainwave state, whether exciting or terrifying, is a gamma or a hyper gamma wave state. The havening touch creates the opposite brainwave state, which is a theta or delta wave state. And it can kind of bounce between the two. When we're in sleep and we're going through what's called memory reconsolidation, we're in a delta wave state.
Hmm.
And that's when our brain's kind of sourcing through all the stressors of the day. It's kind of saying, we're going to remember this. We don't really need to worry about that bologna sandwich. So we're just going to forget that. But hey, let's remember that conversation with that person, and putting information away. It's a sleepy wave state. Theta is tied to memory reconsolidation when we're awake, and also a lot of flow states, mindfulness, meditative states. And that's where we're in that lovely, okay, my brain's in a state of permissive exploration. So the havening touch brings the theta and the delta waves into a stronger presence, or what's called increases their power in our brain at a meta level, while decreasing the gamma presence. And so it says, calm down, be more permissive for intuition, exploration, or even at a deeper level, memory reconsolidation, which then allows the neurons that have gotten freaked out or excited to go, I'm okay, the warm, fuzzy electrochemical blanket. And then there's an entire electrochemical cascade that also happens with different hormones and neurochemicals like serotonin and GABA and oxytocin that further facilitate it. So that's the soothing process. And then when we build towards what we want, we're using that same havening touch to activate neuroplasticity and to facilitate neurons firing and wiring in the direction we want. Because in order to learn, we need acetylcholine and we need dopamine. We have to be curious about it. That's why we go, what if? Because as soon as we go, what if, our brain loves to answer questions, and that intonation even matters. That's acetylcholine and dopamine plus oxytocin and serotonin going, oh, that's cool. I'll invite everybody just to think about, like, what's the last, oh, that's cool thing you've heard? And do you still remember it? Well, if you can bring it up right now, you do, because it was cool enough.
Right.
And then you can amp that up with the havening touch and make it much more likely that your brain's going to go. And that matters because we're triggering that memory reconsolidation electrochemical pattern with the havening touch.
So it's like this touch experience helps make our brain more receptive
Uh-huh.
to cultivating the kinds of states that we want, or redirecting our thoughts in the ways that we need to. I would love to hear a little more about that. You've touched on a few times the creating possibilities protocol, and you have, like, I think 5 different questions in
Yeah.
sequence that you use. And I think it's really useful because I know a lot of people love to use things like affirmations, or, something like, I am joyful. And that doesn't always work when you're feeling quite a gap between where you are and that aspiration of feeling joyful. Or, even with the loving kindness phrases, may I feel safe, may I be happy,
Mhm.
doesn't feel accessible sometimes.
Mhm.
So, That'll make sense if you, to our listeners, I think, if you explain a little bit about this sort of stepwise progression of
Mhm.
this protocol.
Yeah. So the Creating Possibilities protocol, I created that 10, 12 years ago. I was working with a young woman, or she was an adolescent at the time, who just had an abject hopelessness. And I was using EMDR, which is another modality at the time, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing for our listeners, which is a great modality. And she had what I call a sticky brain. Nothing seemed possible to what you just said, Addie. And she just had a lot of really hard things that had happened. And so we started talking about the possibility of possibilities. And I always talk to my patients, and have since my early 20s, about the amygdala and how we can't lie to our amygdala. If our amygdala is having a hard time, if she's scared, nervous, anxious, worried, and especially if she's feeling helpless or hopeless or not loved or unworthy, we can't suddenly just turn around and tell our most primal part of our brain, you are loved. Because our amygdala is going to say, why are you also lying to me? So it's a lie to self. And that's where toxic affirmations can create a lot of chaos for us, because we're like, the affirmation's not working. Now there's something wrong with me.
Mm,
And the difficulty there is, it's not that something's wrong, it's that the amygdala is going, I don't feel safe buying into the words that you're telling me to believe.
mm-hmm.
And so, in a way, it's as though we imagine our amygdala is another part of us over here that we're having a conversation with, saying, what do you need more of in this moment? And let's partner to build that. But we wouldn't walk up to somebody and say, you need to be happy right now. Be happy. Or, like serenity now. Right?
Hopefully not.
Yeah. It doesn't work. So the Creating Possibilities came from this work with this young gal who did incredible work and is an amazing now young woman. It's a long time ago. She's in her early 20s. She's kept me in the loop of how things have progressed. She still uses it, which is very cool. And it started with the possibility of possibilities and saying, what if XYZ? And so for her, she just wanted a sense of having a little bit of strength. So what if I was strong? And she didn't feel strong, but she'd picked up a heavy box before and remembered feeling strong picking up that box. And so I said, well, I want you to remember picking up that box, or let's go pick up a box and notice how that feels to pick up that box. And she's like, oh, I can feel that strength in my muscles. Okay, what if I was strong? What if? What if? And then the repetition with it, eventually what I brought into the Havening Touch, which makes it much more powerful, harnessed the mental rehearsal of it. When the what if started to feel more possible, then it was the can I be? Another question, but a little bit more of an ownership to it. Can I be strong? Huh. What if? Okay, now can I be? And then again, repeating that exploration and that inquiry, inviting the brain to explore that next step in the possibilities. And then from I can be, if that feels doable, we move into the I will be. It's a future embodiment. And it's not, I will be in 5 years. It's in the next 5 seconds. Is this possibly possible?
Hmm.
I will be. Huh. And they're all just gentle inquiries, very self loving curiosity. Will I be? And then if that feels really strong and possible, only then do we move into that I am affirmation. I am strong. Every step of the way, we're checking back in and on self. We're sensing into, how is Amy feeling about this exploration? And if she doesn't like a certain statement, so she's not quite feeling the I am, then we can stay with the I will be, or we can go back to the what ifs. But the inquiries are planting the seeds and strengthening the neural connections. Adding in the Havening touch amplifies that exponentially through the electrochemical changes and says, oh, yes, I can get here much more quickly than I would without the Havening touch. And so we can sculpt our brain. So this is the building the brain we want to have more of, what's missing. And I think on a personal level, this has been one of my most powerful tools in my own journey, because it's going, okay, my Amy's got a lot of stuff she carries around. I've learned a lot of things that I'm unlearning from the way I was raised. And it's an opportunity to give ourselves what should have been but wasn't from our
Mm.
childhood, to say, oh, how do I now turn around and take care of my young self? That inner child work of, oh, my 5 year old's feeling really scared right now. Oh, what if I could give myself some love? I can give myself some love. And building those links into, oh, lovable. And we can be lovable sometimes in 2023, but it might not feel so lovable. And for me, 1985,
Hmm.
and building those links and those bridges.
I love how gradual it is, and that there's a little bit of a structure for that to be a conversation, so that you don't move further than where Amy is letting you go. You respect the signals you're getting back, and you just keep kind of trying it on and wait until it feels authentic to
Mhm.
actually say that next statement or have that next inquiry drop in. And I think that's just really kind, really helpful.
Yeah. Well, I think the word respect is a really important one. So often we are given messages or notices to step outside ourselves in order to care for others, or to self sacrifice, or not turn inward with loving kindness. And so we're working with the fact that those experiences may have happened explicitly or implicitly, and respecting the evolution of our own personal journey to this moment without judgment, without shame, and saying, I'm partnering with you in a respectful, loving manner so that we can co create what we want. The we being ourselves, self, and our fierce warrior protector, Princess Xena gal back there, Amy the
I love that image. It's a great reframing of the amygdala, which we kind of we make a villain out of that
yeah.
part of ourselves sometimes, and that's
Hmm.
probably not so useful.
Yeah, no, yeah, she's fighting for us, and sometimes she just doesn't have the toolkit to fight in the way that's appropriate right now. And all those hard things came out of ways that she learned to survive at some point in our life, and they matter. So it's the high five, Amy. Okay, high five, and new opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much for all that you've shared. And we have already been talking for quite a while,
Oh
so
goodness, thank
I
you.
want to respect your time. But could we close by having you give us some ways we can find more of your work, or how people can learn more about havening?
Absolutely. You can. We have tons of free resources. I'm very much a shareware person. My mission is to help humanity feel better. In a lot of ways, that's selfish because I'm trying to figure out what did my 13-year-old self need and bring that to the world. So we have, or I have a TikTok channel that is all about answering people's questions about neuroscience and trauma and mental health. And so each day I release a video, basically sharing information. And so if our listeners are on TikTok, you can find me at Dr. Kate Truitt. Post a question, I'll do a video reply. The YouTube channel, we do two longer content videos every week, a psychoeducational and then a guided exercise, as well as short videos, just kind of flashes in the pan of data to help people with their educational journey, mental health literacy, and then guided exercises. Instagram, of course. So these are all at Dr. Kate Truitt. So we've got all the platforms.
I'll link to all of them on the
Oh, thank
website so
you.
people can just click on them. But yeah,
Yeah. And then if listeners are interested in going deeper and really cultivating their own personal self healing journey, that's where the Healing in Your Hands book you mentioned comes in. And so that's available at all major retailers, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, so on and so forth. And it has it's Audible, Kindle. You can kind of find it on all the platforms as well. And then if people want to come to our workshops, like you mentioned, you can find those through drtruitt.com. And I do have one coming up on August 29th. So I'm not sure when you'll post this, but that will
But it'll be
be,
before then, yeah.
yeah, and I'm happy to send you the link for that. I partner with a nonprofit here in Los Angeles to do low cost trainings a couple times a year. And this one's all about partnering with a brain that's in crisis, the neuroscience of the crisis state, and and a toolkit for helping the brain calm down and build resilience. And so it's an experiential workshop that I do with Echo trainings. And so if people go to echo.org or echotrainings.org, they'll be able to find that there. And then we have drtruitt.com for my team. If you're in LA or California, we treat throughout California and a couple other states, and workshops and tons of resources there too. So lots of opportunities. And if people want to email and have access, info@drtruitt.com will get you right to us.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And you're such a generous, you know, proponent of content. You know, you're making so many educational resources, and it's incredible that you have the time and the energy to share, and I think we can all benefit from learning. So
Right back to you.
thank
Thank you
you.
for all the healing you're bringing to the world.
Thank you so much for taking the time today, Dr. Kate. I really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you, Andy. I'll talk soon.
So that's today's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with a friend, subscribe on YouTube, or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and help others find it that way. To learn more about my work, the Moved to Meditate class library, courses, or teacher trainings, go to movedtomeditate.yoga. This is Addie D. Hilster. Thanks so much for listening.